65 years ago, Jane, you set out for Tanzania and began what would become groundbreaking research. Today, you stand as a world-renowned conservationist and also a messenger of hope. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. Before we get into the meat of the conversation, we're joined by Mr. H, and I'd love to ask you who he is and what he represents.
Okay, well, Mr. H, who's very famous, it was given to me 35 years ago. And the man who gave him to me thought he was giving me a stuffed chimpanzee. But anybody in the audience who knows anything about chimpanzees will realize this isn't a chimp. He's called Mr. H because the man was Gary Horn. Gary Horn lost his eyesight when he was 21 in the US Marines. He decided to become a magician. Everybody said, Gary, if you're a magician, if you're blind, you can't be a magician. Children don't know he's blind. And at the end of the show, he'll tell them, and he'll say, if things go wrong in your life, never give up. There's always a way forward. So he's a symbol of the indomitable human spirit.
Indomitable human spirit. We will get to more reasons for hope, but I want to also zoom back because I think a lot of people are familiar with your story, but you have written that were it not for a groundbreaking conference that you attended in 1986, you might have remained a scientist on the ground. You might not have embarked on a speaking journey that takes you on the road 300 days out of every year. So can you talk about, briefly, just remind the audience, what was it that sparked your interest in conservation and biodiversity?
Okay, well, the best days of my life were out in the rainforest and learning about chimpanzees and other creatures and the interconnection of all living things. And then I helped to organize this conference. When I began, it was just me out there. By 1986, there were 6 other field study sites. So we brought the scientists together who were working on chimps, wanted to know if chimp behavior changes in different environments, and also is there something like culture, which there is. But at the same time, we had a session on conservation, and it was a shock to see across Africa where chimps were studied, forests were being cut down, chimpanzee numbers were dropping. And, I went to the conference as a scientist, and I left as an advocate. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I had to try and do something. So that's what began it.
And that's what began it. Now, we're in a room of founders, CEOs, leaders, people who have a lot of financial and economic conversations. And you have said that the health of the planet should be at the heart of every economic conversation. What does that mean, and what should this audience understand about that statement?
Well, I think, the important thing for everyone to understand is that we are part of the natural world. It seems these days everybody's so involved with technology that we forget we're not only part of the natural world, we're an animal like the others. But we depend on it. We depend on it for clean air, water, food, clothing. Everything basically comes from the natural world. But what we depend on is healthy ecosystems. And it's the ecosystems that we're gradually destroying because of unsustainable demands made on our natural resources.
Unsustainable demands, and unsustainable demands that come from our companies, from the private sector?
It comes from 2 reasons. It comes, well, 3 perhaps. It comes from unsustainable lifestyles, which many people on this planet, myself included. So people are making these unsustainable demands because they want too much, more than they need, much more than they need. Secondly, poverty, because when you're really poor, you're going to destroy the environment in order to survive, to make money from charcoal or timber, something like that. And so these are the reasons that we're destroying the planet. And it's a thing for economists. I can't work this out, but we have a growing population of humans, a growing population of our livestock, and at the same time, the natural resources of the planet are finite. So how do we care for the people on the planet, but at the same time care for the environment for future generations. It's a tough problem, but the one thing that makes us more different from any other animal is our intellect. And I always say we are the most intellectual species to walk the planet, but we're not intelligent. If you're intelligent, you don't destroy your only home. And so we've got to get together, and scientists are beginning now to really work out technology that can help us live in greater harmony with the natural world, like in renewable energy, capturing CO2 before it goes up into the greenhouse gases, those kinds of things. But it's a problem, and it should be at the heart of everything. It should be at the heart of politics and at the heart of business.
You've written about how intellect, human intellect, is one of your reasons for hope. And in the Book of Hope, the 2021 instant New York Times bestseller, you tell the story of a CEO who initiated the restoration of a quarry in Kenya that his own company had had a hand in destroying. And the details of this story are perhaps not as important as the lessons you've learned from this success story. What do you want this audience to understand about the risk that the CEO took to restore that land?
Well, it cost money, but the fortunate thing is he was able to find the most extraordinary man to undertake this restoration, because you would have said, there's no way you can restore this. It was right down, the seawater at the bottom was coming through. It was gone. But this incredible man managed to bring it back, and now it's got a forest and elephants and, you know, amazing. But I've seen this kind of thing all around the world. It's unbelievable that places we have destroyed, given time and perhaps some help, nature will come back.
Nature will come back. It's a lesson in resilience.
It's a lesson in resilience.
You have another CEO story that you said might be a tearjerker. He's fighting to make his company sustainable. Can you share that story now?
Yes, I was talking to a group of CEOs in Singapore, and he came up to me afterwards, and he said, Jane, I promise, for the last, 8-10 years, I've really been struggling to make my business as sustainable as possible in the countries where we source our products, in the supply chain, as much as possible. That's very difficult. In the way we conduct business in our offices and the way we treat our customers, in all those ways, for 3 reasons. One, I saw the writing on the wall. I saw that in some places we're using up the natural resources faster than nature can replenish them, or nature may never replenish them in some instances. Secondly, consumer pressure. People are beginning to ask questions. How was it made? Did it harm the environment? Was it cruel to animals like the terrible factory farms? Is it cheap because of unfair wages? If so, look for a more environmentally sustainable, ethical product. It might cost a bit more, but if it costs a bit more, we'll value it more and waste less. The waste is terrible. People just buy. I've seen masses of food thrown away, going into landfills, and clothing too. People buy something, they wear it a couple of times, and then, if they're good people, they at least pass it on. But often it ends up in landfills. And I've heard of big fashion places that actually burn their leftover stock. It makes me really angry. And I'm a peaceful person.
You are a peaceful person. What do you say to CEOs or executives in this room who wish to embark on conservation efforts or to do carbon emissions or carbon offset, but they feel pressured or stymied by their board, by their shareholders, or the political climate?
Well, I would say, if they really feel that it's important to do the right thing, they need to have courage. I think this particular time we're living through, there's too much lack of courage out there.
There's too much lack of courage. Yeah, you can clap for that. Also, I would use this applause break to note that if you scan that QR code, you will be able to enter a question that will come up on the confidence monitor that I might be able to work into the conversation. So if you have a question for Jane, this is how we are taking questions throughout the summit today. So that QR code should do that. Now, speaking of the political climate and lack of a lot of things, USAID cuts were devastating earlier this year, and they affected the Jane Goodall Institute.
They absolutely did.
Can you talk about that effect and how you're thinking about plugging the gaps left by the lack of that funding?
Well, we had a major grant from USAID through the Tanzanian branch, and when it was cut, it was a 5-year thing, we lost $5.5 million per year for the next 4 years. That meant we had to lay off good people. But I think the effect of the cuts in other areas are even more devastating because people are dying. They can't get the medication. Babies are being born now with HIV, which wouldn't have happened before. And what we're doing is realizing we need to diversify. We need to move more towards corporate funding over a period and not rely on one government source. Because governments change, get different presidents, companies tend to follow the same kind of line, same kind of mission.
So corporate donations is where your attention is going to. So partnerships, new partnerships.
Partnerships, so that, you know, the Jane Goodall Institute now has a jolly good name.
It's a jolly good name.
Well, it does. A good name, right?
It's a great name.
Anyway, so sometimes it can benefit a corporation to have a relationship with us. And of course, that relationship will be super for us and for the environment. And you know, we've got to think about future generations. I don't know, I've got 3 grandchildren. I probably have a great-grandchild sometime in the fairly near future. But, you know, I care terribly about the natural world, the animals there. I care about our domestic animals too. They all have personalities, minds and emotions. But I care about the children. If we go on destroying the environment the way we are today, carry on with business as usual, what's going to happen to our great-great-grandchildren? Will there even be a planet? Some scientists are saying we're reaching the tipping point in different areas. And if it gets too hot, and it's getting hotter, what's going to happen?
That can be a paralyzing question, and that can be paralyzing data. How do you overcome the sense of despair that you might feel when you see those statistics?
Because I firmly believe we got a window of time. It's not a long one. Even the top scientists say, yes, we have a window. We've just got together and take action to slow down climate change, to slow down loss of biodiversity, to move to a plant-based diet, because that has the industrial agriculture for growing crops has a devastating effect on the environment. And the animal agriculture too. Billions of animals have to feed them, clear land, grow grain, more grain for animals than starving people today, which is shocking. They use a lot of water. Iran has now virtually run out of water. I don't know what they're going to do. I was talking to an Iranian friend yesterday, and he said it's devastating. And, you know, what's the point of worrying about nuclear facilities when the country's running out of water?
We'll get to reasons of hope, but I want to stay on the partnership conversation just briefly because your institute's Takare work blends together your knowledge with local communities' knowledge, with technological advancements, and I think there are a lot of lessons for this audience in that work. Can you speak about it?
Yes, well, it was back in 1986 when I realized that forests were going across Africa, chimp numbers were dropping, and went and realized a lot about why the chimps were suffering, but also how the local people were struggling to survive in some places. Crippling poverty, lack of health and education, degradation of farmland. Flying over the tiny Gombe National Park, it had been part of a great forest belt across Africa. By the mid-1980s, it was a little island of forest surrounded by bare hills. And it was obvious that people were, needing money from charcoal, timber, land to grow more food. And that's when it hit me. If we can't help these people to find ways of making a living without destroying the environment, we can't save chimps, forests, or anything else. And so that's when JGI began our Takare program. And it was based on what the local people asked us for. And it was a group of local Tanzanians who went into the poor villages, not a group of arrogant white people telling them what we were going to do. Tanzanians who said, what can JGI do to make your lives better? They wanted to grow more food, which meant restoring fertility to overused farmland without agricultural chemicals, and better facilities for education and health for their children, which we did working with the Tanzanian authorities. And that program spread, and Dr. Lillian Pintea, who's here somewhere now, he came in to start the Jane Goodall Institute's Conservation Science program. And he's the one who introduced into Takare GIS, GPS, satellite imagery, and now moving into, you know, drones and sort of the creeping in with AI a bit, which, yes, it can be very useful.
It can be very, you've seen success with AI in the Takare program.
Well, yes, because AI can do things like, if you have a camera trap, it can not only, AI can help in identifying as individuals the different animals that go by. So you can give them names without ever seeing them.
Wow. I like these, excuse me, I like these stories because they offer points of progress in an area where people can feel despair.
Yes,
And
I should add before you go on, if you fly over Gombe today, that program, Takare, has been so successful that people now understand saving the environment isn't just for wildlife, it's for their own future. So it's in 6 other countries now where JGI works with chimpanzees.
And you can see it from the sky. You can see the green instead of the brown.
See the green's coming back, the trees are coming back, insects, birds, biodiversity. It's a big success.
It's a big success. Well, I asked that because we have a question from the audience about what do you say to the younger generation who feel so hopeless and fearful for their future? And I know in your books you've written about eco-grief. This year began with the wildfires in Los Angeles that were devastating, and speaking for me, I felt paralyzed watching that footage. How do you move forward when you feel when you might feel such despair?
Yes, and it's not just Los Angeles. The fires around the world, and they're all over the place. It was realizing when young people were actually beginning to lose hope way back in the mid-1980s, believe it or not. And I was already traveling around the world, and I found young people were losing hope. They were angry, or they were depressed, or mostly just apathetic, not seeming to care. And so I began asking them, why do you feel this way? And they said, well, you've compromised our future, and there's nothing we can do about it. Well, we've not only compromised the future of our young people, we've been stealing it ever since the Industrial Revolution. But when they said there was nothing they could do, I said no. So we started Roots and Shoots with 12 high school students in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. They were worried about poaching in the national parks, about the illegal dynamite fishing, about street children with no homes, about the treatment of stray dogs, different things. They wanted me to solve, they wanted me to solve them. And I said, go and get your friends who feel the same. We had a meeting of about 30 high school students from 8 schools. And this program, Roots and Shoots, was born with the main message, every day you live, you make an impact on the planet, and you can choose what sort of impact you make. Secondly, because everything's interrelated, each group will choose. They choose. It's not top-down. They choose 3 projects, one to help people, one to help other animals, one to help the environment that we share. And it's now with members from kindergarten through university, more adults forming groups in 76 countries. And so many people have said, joining Roots and Shoots was the best thing I ever did. It changed my life. That's why I'm doing what I do now. It's all about action. And when you travel around the world and you see all these young people, they're planting trees, they're clearing litter, they're writing letters, and it gives you so much hope, because they have so much hope if they're empowered to take action.
Agency and action are crucial elements of hope. And to that point, we had another audience question. What is the single most impactful thing one can do to advance, I can't read my writing, nature work, nature relationship, conservation?
Well, I would say, there's a lot of things you can do, and it depends who you are. But moving towards a plant-based diet is really important. It really is. And then, apart from that, just think about your own environmental footstep, how you live. I mean, ask yourself, do I need this thing? Ask yourself, how was it made? I'm not going to buy it just like that. Think about what's going on in the world around you. Should I support this, or should I demonstrate against it? And be courageous.
Be courageous.
Yes.
You have hope as a theme across so many of your books, which I think was surprising to me when I looked at all the titles. I think I expected to see more science and animal names in some of these book titles. And so I'm wondering, we talk a lot in some of these spaces about the need to convince people about the realities of climate change. Is the greater threat to the Earth's planet a sense of hopelessness among those who recognize the facts but feel helpless?
Well, that's one of the reasons, but it's the way that corporations and governments behave. So somehow it needs to involve more and more and more and more of the citizens in taking their own steps to help prevent climate change, or slow it down, rather.
You also write about some examples of species that have been brought back from the brink, and I think these stories offer a tremendous amount of hope. What is one of the greater recent success stories there?
Well, it's not so recent, but it's, I think, my favorite. And it's about a little bird called the black robin that lives in New Zealand. And because they are flightless birds, then when settlers came in and introduced cats and rats, the population began to sink rapidly. And one man was passionately fond of them because he studied them for his PhD, and he was really worried. So he begged the government, let me catch them, put them on an offshore island away from the cats and the rats and the stoats, and took 2 years to get the permission. By that time, there were very few birds. They put them on the island. When they went back in the spring, there were 2 fertile birds, one male and one female. And I won't go into the details, but he took eggs away and then put them with another bird species. Second time, he took their eggs away, gave them to another bird species. And then, of course, they got to learn to be like black robins, so he took them back to Mum and Dad. And he said, she looked at me as if to say, what next? 4 babies and her own 2. And he said, it's all right, darling, we're going to help you. And so he and his team went around catching insects and helping to feed all these 6 babies. Now there are over 500, wow, spread over 4 offshore islands with hope of genetic diversity.
That's a great story of how one person can create change. I want to squeeze in 2 more questions in the minute and a half that we have. Lena Taylor from the audience wants to know, because you mentioned courage, how do you find your own courage?
My own courage? Well, people say it was courageous to go to Gombe out into the forest. That was my dream. It wasn't brave at all. But all the animals, leopards and buffalo, and all the poisonous snakes. Well, I always thought if you don't harm animals, they won't harm you. People said, how stupid. But they haven't harmed me, so it wasn't so stupid, was it? So, what did you say?
How did you find your courage? But you're saying
courage.
It wasn't
I
courage.
didn't need courage there. Traveling around the world today, talking to different people, it doesn't require courage. It requires persistence. It requires one to be obstinate, and it requires one to understand that when you really get so frustrated because a company or a person is doing something that's so damaging to the environment in the future, and the pointlessness of arguing with that person or that group, You've got to reach the heart. And I do that with stories.
You do that with stories. Well, we are out of time. In the 10 seconds before I escort you off the stage, can you give this audience one charge, one piece of homework for when they leave today? What do you want the people in this room to do?
Okay, one piece of homework. It's very easy. Just think that today and tomorrow and the next day, each day you're going to be making some kind of impact. Think and choose wisely what sort of impact you make.
Jane Goodall, thank you so much.